We're live.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the October 2023 Justice Resource Advisory Council meeting. We're going to get started today with roll call. So when I call your name, if you could indicate your presence or not. I guess silence if you're not here. Commissioner Moore?
Present.
BK Wesley present. Chief Blake?
Present.
Janelle is here for Pat Freeman.
Yes, ma'am. Here.
Sylvia Clement. Danny Cohen. Judge Thornburg. Meredith here for DA's office. Jean Marie Christie. Here. Thank you. Sam Sneed.
Here.
Tiffany Hanacho. Donald Rose. Chief Zach, I think I have.
Yeah, Mike Lamb here for Chief Zach.
All right. Dustin Dow. Julia Horrocks. Suzanne Avid.
Present.
Rachel Nygaard.
Present.
Deborah Campbell. Mayor Menheimer. Lori Anderson. Jay Hackett is out. He did notify us that he would be out for this meeting, and he sent us correct. Julie Rise. All right, thank you. We have a quorum present. So we'll go ahead and get started. First on the agenda is consent agenda, which includes the approval of the October agenda. This was distributed in advance, but also, or maybe you don't have that. You should have this online if you can download online as well. Also, the June minutes were included. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections to the June agenda? Not June agenda, I'm sorry, June minutes. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you for that. First on our agenda today is our standing item for Justice System Data Report. And today we have with us Kendra Queen and Hannah Calloway. They will be providing an update on the community diversion data analysis. You got it.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm Kendra. Thank you for having us today. I'm the Diversion Services Supervisor at the Justice Resource Center. And I'm Hannah Calloway. I'm the case manager currently at the Justice Resource Center, but while this was going on, I was the community diversion case manager.
So Hannah started as a grant employee, and now she's on permanent full time with us at the center. There we go. Okay, sorry.
All right. So the Justice Involved Substance Use Grant, it was a partnership between the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office and Justice Services, and it was funded by the state Health and Human Services. So it was very broad. It was justice involved substance use is what the grant says. It ran through December 1st of 2021, and it ended in June of 2023, the end of June. And the purpose of the grant was to serve individuals on probation, pretrial supervision, those at risk for future justice involvement, basically anyone justice involved. Again, the grant was pretty broad, so like pending charges. And so we were able to serve individuals based on housing instability, mental illness, substance use, and difficulties accessing support services. So we provided eligible participants connection to behavioral health treatment and or basic needs. So main thing that we really worked on were, I had cell phones to give out. I was able to provide rent at sober living houses for folks, transportation, so bus tickets, Uber gift cards, hygiene supplies, clothing, all those basic needs that we don't really think about, but people that are struggling with the justice system probably need a lot of. So yeah. Go to the next slide. So this analysis looked at program enrollment from that first date of December 1st through February 28th. Dr. Creighton wanted to look specifically at, we'll talk about it, but enrollments and bookings, jail bookings, 3 months out. So we had to stop at February 28th to make it fit what we were trying to analyze. So, and the jail data were used to determine bookings for participants for a defined period, pre and post program enrollment with me. So the data set includes 222 unique individuals.
So I'm gonna move these out of the way because I feel like I'm gonna move around and probably trip on them a couple more times. So I'm just gonna move them out of the walkway. So with our data set of the 222 individuals, 85% were white, 70% were male, and 62% were aged 30 through 50. Over 1/3 were unhoused, and this was huge because Hannah mentioned that she focused on basic needs. So most people would come to us from court and would be referred to us through pretrial or probation, and 1/3 of those 222 were unsheltered or unhoused. And then 71% were on probation or pretrial supervision. So we've actually looked at 207 individuals in the analysis because we started with 222, but 15 they left our detention center and went to another county. So we actually, in our data set, were only 207. And then 170 of these individuals experienced at least one booking since December of 2020. So we looked at 3 months before they enrolled, which there were 103 jail bookings 3 months before folks enrolled with Hannah. And then 3 months post-enrollment with Hannah, there were 63 jail bookings. So we saw a 39% reduction in jail bookings with that 3-month time period. And then with 6 months before enrollment, there were 191 jail bookings, 6 months prior to enrollment with Hannah. And then 6 months post were 149 jail bookings. So that's a 22% reduction.
Yeah, so the largest booking reductions were experienced by male participants and then individuals between ages 40 to 49, as you can see in the chart here. Black participants experienced a greater reduction than white participants during the 3-month period, but the difference narrows in that 6-month analysis. This is also true for the difference in pre and post enrollment bookings for the sheltered and unsheltered populations. Nearly 80% of participants in the program were on some type of community supervision. So again, probation, pretrial, at the time of their enrollment. 27% of them were on pretrial specifically, and 51% were on probation. So the greatest reduction in pre and post enrollment bookings were experienced by those on pretrial. See right there, about 57, almost 57%, 56. And then this was also true for 6-month pre and post enrollment bookings. Yeah, so yeah, just the next. Okay, basically, you'll see here we've got cell phone at the top and then multiple interventions. So what that basically means is that I provided more than one thing. So that could be a cell phone and bus tickets and clothes, or that could be a cell phone and transitional housing and a gift card, or whatever it may be. So multiple interventions, that's what that means. So range from basic needs, like I was saying, such as book bags, supplies, and cell phones. Most participants, 63%, received more than one intervention. So most of the people that I worked with, I gave more than just one thing to, more than one intervention. And it was that group that experienced the greatest reductions. Cell phones were the second most frequent intervention provided. Gave out a lot of cell phones. And this group also experienced a reduction in bookings at both of the 3 and 6 month period. So you can see there. Of the 130 participants who received multiple interventions, there was 21 that received this combination of a cell phone in transitional housing. And these participants actually experienced a slightly higher reduction in bookings, right there at 58%, than some of the other combinations of interventions. And I mean, honestly, I think that just speaks to having your basic needs being able to be met, and that helps you be able to stay in compliance with your probation officer, your pretrial supervisor. One thing I did want to point out that was interesting to me is, like we talked about pretrial, the cell phones that I gave out only had 3 months of service on them. So it was interesting to see that pretrial had a 56% reduction 3 months after enrollment, but then that 6-month period goes down a little bit. And I wonder if that's because, that service on the cell phone is gone, they can't check in with their coordinator or maybe. So I just thought that was interesting.
And it's important to note that of these 222, those are all unique individuals. So in this data set, these 222 individuals came back to see Hannah multiple times in the time that they were enrolled in community diversion. So it wasn't just a one and done. They didn't come into this Justice Resource Center, get what they need and leave. Hannah was a huge support to them through the process. She would help them with pretrial check-ins. She would help them with their phone if they didn't understand how to do their phone. A lot of our service providers are still doing virtual therapy. So if someone's enrolled in IOP and they're required to do IOP with their probation or with their pretrial, that cell phone was their lifeline to do and remain in compliance with their supervision. The other thing that Hannah did was she realized that people really needed support in the community. So she mentioned gift cards. She would meet people at Walmart and Ingles and help them. She would had a limit, so $50 each person. Nobody got more than one gift card. Nobody got more than one cell phone. But she would meet them at Ingles and Walmart if they were waiting on their food stamp card to come in the mail, if they were, not eligible for food stamps or food nutrition services. So she would do some basic shopping with them to just give them some food until they could either make it to the food bank or they would get their food stamp card in the mail. The other thing Hannah did was she made a connection with her partners at Homeward Bound. So she now holds office hours at Homeward Bound on Monday mornings. And when she's there, she helps people enroll, or she helps them check in with pretrial. And then she also helps folks check in with our other diversion programs so they can remain in compliance with those. So it's all around just about using our partners in the community and all of these resources that we have, and seeing Hannah in the courthouse providing these services and also in the community built a lot of trust and rapport with these participants. So, so the greatest reductions were with Black participants, male participants, and then participants between the ages of 40 and 49. And then those who are unsheltered on pretrial and those who received multiple interventions. So the interventions, we measure that by the cell phones, paying for the sober living and bus tickets. And that is all. Do we have any questions? Yes, Sam.
Hannah, so first of all, just to be clear, these are all people who've been arrested. So they're either on pretrial or on probation, right?
Yes.
So that's
Some of them might have had involvement in the justice system like 6 months ago, maybe, and we're still kind of dealing with a case going on. Some of them had active cases, but they weren't on supervision. Some of them might have had a DSS case open.
all right.
There were some unsheltered folks that run the risk of being justice involved. Like they have a past. They're not currently justice involved now, but they could sleep on the wrong doorstep and then be justice involved tomorrow. That kind of, it was just a bit of a large group, but most of them were on some kind of supervision.
In comparing the pretrial supervision population to the probation population, what do you think accounts for increased success, if you want to call it that, with the pretrial population versus the probation population? Because they have an officer assigned to their case who meets with them at least once a month, right?
Mm-hmm. I will say the connection that Hannah was able to establish with each person that was on some sort of supervision, but we are in the same department as pretrial. So pretrial is downstairs, and Hannah had direct communication with each of the coordinators, would have regular check-ins with the coordinators, talk to them about how certain people were doing. If they had a question, they could come to Hannah. But she was also accessible, I hope it's okay that I'm speaking for you, but she was also very accessible to all of probation. So they're just 2-3 floors down.
Right.
And they would ask her to come down, they would ask for updates, compliance updates. So I think the communication and the collaboration between the agencies really helped in the programs.
Well, do you think it was better with pretrial just because of the nature of your connection, or do you think that accounts for it, or do you just think it's the nature of the population and maybe it may not be statistically significant anyway?
Honestly, I think with pretrial, the way that they work is a lot of those coordinators, you have to text them to check in. Like, they'll see you in person, but they really prefer you to check in. And if people don't have a cell phone, that completely, kind of severs that ability for them to check in and stay in compliance. Whereas probation, they're probably coming here a lot more often. They're seeing their officer a lot more often, even like for drug screens or whatever it may be. But with pretrial, there's not quite as much, I would say, face-to-face.
There's not as many barriers.
Yeah,
too.
there's not as many
Yeah.
barriers. So I feel like just being able to give people a cell phone and have them check in with their coordinator, that shows a lot
Right, so your interventions are just more successful in that group.
with that.
Okay.
There's less restrictions too. So with probation, there's specific restrictions and conditions, whereas with pretrial, there might be less.
I know you said the cell phones only had 3 months of service, but were they smartphones? So like when the service ran out, they could still,
Yeah, they were smartphones.
is that a program that the JRC could continue? It sounds like it's really,
Yeah.
okay.
Maybe.
To get people access to that.
We're hoping.
Is there any guidance or wisdom data about substance use? In any of this or anything that's on that?
Anyone who presented or screened for substance use disorders or any substance use referrals that were made?
Both.
Well, Hannah made a lot of partners in the community because she was looking for, again, I hope it's okay that I'm speaking for you. She was looking for ways to bridge gaps in the system so that, because our goal here was to bridge any gap for success for people who are justice involved. So Hannah established a partnership with MAHEC, and we were able to sign a contract between Justice Services and MAHEC with their MAT program. There are actually dollars in the grant for medication-assisted treatment to a provider, and MAHEC was identified as that provider. But it turns out that most of the people Hannah saw needed their basic needs met. They weren't at that point yet where they could look at medication-assisted treatment. They needed cell phones. They needed just basic connections that the rest of us have, and we have every day to function. So I think you made probably 7 or 8 referrals or more, and people just weren't appropriate for that level of treatment because they just weren't either ready for it, or they needed a cell phone, they needed stable housing or shelter. And then with other folks who presented or screened for substance use disorders, Hannah was able to work with the even their AHOPE case manager, their probation officer, pretrial, wherever they were in the system, to either link them to care or reestablish care. Because either they had become non-compliant or stopped going to treatment because of those basic needs not being met. So after she was able to help them stabilize a little bit, she could get them back enrolled in treatment.
I work with ADACT as well. So these were the people that were coming out of treatment, and they had already maybe been set up with somewhere to go in the community for treatment from ADACT. So it was just all around just different types of people, but a lot of the people that just were not able to even be at that level of change or that state of change yet. But
Another question. Has there been any research or like potential for research on the correlation of people who have cell phones versus who don't, and the failure to appear rate? Because like my gut instinct and like anecdotal evidence would be like, you don't have a cell phone, you probably can't keep track of the date. You don't have a cell phone, you can't get in touch with pretrial or your attorney. I don't know if that's been done or if it could be done, but I think it would be a very interesting like access to the court system study of like personal technology and keeping up with your court dates.
Okay.
And selfishly, the more people come to court, the less paperwork people have to do, so.
Yeah, we could definitely search for some research.
I'm sorry, I'm just getting lawyer questions all day.
Yeah.
But out of curiosity, have you considered, or what would it take for y'all to do more homeward bound access? Because I heard you say Monday, that's also the Superior Court calendar day. Lots of things are happening then.
Yeah.
Is there potential for another day as well? Because it seems like that would be really useful.
Yeah, I chose Monday because when I talked to A-Hope, they said that's kind of their busiest since they're closed on the weekends and it's their first day back. But we also have Carrie that is at A-Hope as well on Tuesdays. But definitely I feel like there's probably an opportunity for me to be there another day.
And other places in the community. So
Yeah.
we're speaking with Moja, the Pure Living Room, and Sunrise right now for the rest of the team to have office hours there throughout the week. So that we're not just always expecting to measure compliance and diversion programs with people coming to us. We'll meet them in the community. Carrie is at A-Hope on Tuesday mornings. She actually has office hours. Carrie's the coordinator of Adult Misdemeanor Diversion Program and the Unhoused Diversion Program, which is a specialized track. And she actually sends them the court calendars every month for admin so that they can also let everybody know when their court dates are and to lower those amounts of FTAs or called and failed. And then she's doing pretrial check-ins as well, or check-ins for the other diversion programs.
I just wanted to mention that she also, she'll email me, like, I've met with so-and-so at A-Hope, can I go ahead and sign them up for diversion? I'm like, sure, go ahead. So, happy to do that.
That's a good point. She's constantly looking for people that might be eligible and divert them from the courts into our programs.
Just real quick on the unhoused, what charges are you usually seeing with the unhoused population?
It varied. I mean, well, they can, soliciting alms, trespasses, misdemeanor larceny, intoxicated, disrupted, things like that.
Sam, you have some.
Assuming that there's room for improvement, Hannah, can you identify, like any one thing that you might be able to do to improve the program, or do you think that it's about as good as it's going to be?
No, I definitely think some improvement could be, I want to say like making sure, maybe like following up with these folks like at that 6-month mark. Like Kendra was saying, a lot of participants came back, but there were some that didn't. And so if it would be possible, following up with them and seeing like, if they kind of just drop off at 3 months or 6 months, like what's going on, what else can we do? Definitely that. I feel like just being able to continue that case management and follow through with them. But again, the population, especially the unhoused population, it can be hard to stay in touch. If you give them a phone, they lose it, which is very easy. And then, I never see them at A-Hope or whatever it may be. Like that population is a little harder, but the people on pretrial and probation, if they kind of just drop off, could definitely be room for improvement. Where I'm like following up with their people, like what's going on, what can I do to help them stay on track?
Funding question, you showed an 18-month timeframe that this is summarizing. What happened when the grant ended in the summer? Did it get picked up and funded elsewhere, or is it over and done?
It's over and done. I believe it was COVID relief dollars. So it's the Justice Involved Substance Use Disorder Grant, and it ended on June 30th.
And we have, I don't know when this will happen, but we also have data from March, April, May, and June of this year to include in this data set. So I don't know how that will change, but I do know I saw a lot of people during that time. So
Those were
I
probably
think the numbers will go up. I don't know. I know the unique individual served will definitely go up. So it'd be interesting to see.
How much was that grant for? I'm sorry, Mike.
And a lot of times the unhoused population are oftentimes victims of crime, so
Yeah.
we will have contact with them, not in an enforcement matter, but as taking a report form. So that's one resource that you may have as far as keeping up with folks that have fallen off the list after that 3-month period. So it's a possibility.
Perfect. Thank you.
You know how much that how much money was lost by that? How much was the grant for? If that's something you wanted to consider.
How much was the county awarded? So I will say that this was a partnership with the sheriff's office. So the other half of this grant was used in the sheriff's office with child support services. So there was a peer support working for Sunrise, and he was posted up at the Justice Resource Center, and he was in child support court Mondays and Tuesdays, I believe, working with the custodial parents, helping them with connections in the community, finding jobs, looking at paying off some purges, I believe. So he was doing a lot, and this grant was split in half. I think I talked with Vanessa before I came here, so I was trying to figure out the total amount. I will say Hannah spent everything that was in her budget. Hannah spent everything, which was good because that shows that it was all needed. So I think I can't remember the exact amount of the total award.
It looks like it was $700,000 across both functions, across both years.
Okay, thank you.
We can get an annualized breakdown and be more specific to community diversion. I will say there was a concurrent program running at the same time with our community reentry team, and they were looking at a similar population. And so just trying to make sure we did lose funding, right? So how do we kind of work in partnership so people didn't essentially just have nothing? So we still have a little residuals, and I know you guys are working on the cell phone program with a local company, so we're still trying to keep some resources available.
Because of the success that Hannah's interventions of cell phones had, we were able to request some SGC funds for just a small amount of cell phones for diversion enrolled participants.
We're, excuse me, also exploring the opportunity to utilize some opioid settlement funds and share some programs for such things as well.
I think what we're finding across programs is that having funding and availability for those social determinants of health is really where we can see success. And so we have multiple pots of opportunity. And opioid, I was gonna say, thanks Josh, opioid settlement funds does have a balance of funding specifically for that. And then departments are reviewing how to distribute that equitably across our different programs. So that's an opportunity to move some of this forward or sustain this. Any more questions? This is great. Great presentation. Thank you, Kendra and Hannah. So next up, we have our strategy and innovation team. They're gonna provide a recap of the retreat. JREX retreat, I forget the day of the retreat, but it was maybe a month or so ago, and it was well attended, and we had a really good conversation, a really good time, and we were able to document some of the learnings that we had and some next steps. And so Kathleen will provide us with that update.
Hey everybody, thank you DK. For folks that haven't met, my name is Kathleen Blackney. I work in the county's Office of Strategy and Innovation. As DK said, my colleague Heather is here as well. She's been supporting some of the work you'll see. So yeah, as DK said, we're just gonna give a summary of this retreat that we facilitated last month. The purpose of this retreat was essentially to clarify scope, purpose of the JRAC, celebrate and acknowledge accomplishments, and set priorities for this group moving forward. Thank you, Josh. So the very first thing we did was review that purpose. These materials have been sent out to y'all ahead of time, so I'm not gonna read all the words to you just off the slide, but this is what is pulled from the bylaws, the JRAC bylaws. We reviewed this and then asked participants to describe the purpose of the JRAC in their own words. Key themes that came out of that were essentially about collaboration, the opportunity to bring in stakeholders from across the justice system and intersecting systems, the opportunity to look at what we're doing, really monitor its effectiveness, monitoring and evaluation piece that this body can be, as well as identifying problems, thinking about solutions to those problems across the system. So those were the big themes that came out of like, what is the JRAC here for? So the next thing we did was look at strengths and challenges of this body. So again, everything you see here, this is as generated by the JRAC members who are in the group, in their own words. Big themes on the strength side were about collaboration and the benefits of being able to share resources. We have communications tools in some bodies that may pick up where others are lacking, vice versa. And being able to leverage the shared knowledge and resources from the different folks in this group and entities represented in this group. Challenges were a lot about engagement. It's great to have so many stakeholders at the table and keep everybody involved, and data sharing information across our systems when it comes to privacy, as well as different infrastructures. How do they talk to each other? A lot longer list. Again, you'll have these materials, but those are some of the big themes that really came out of the conversation. So from that kind of level setting, what is the purpose of this group? What do we think are some of our strengths? What are the challenges that we're facing? The next activity that we did was focusing on national standards set out by the Criminal Justice Collaborating Council? Coordinating Council, thank you. So basically the group that sets the standards for, like, JRAC isn't just a local idea, right? There are best practices, there are standards for what it means to operate one of these bodies. We looked at those standards and evaluated them in light of the challenges that we had just generated previously. As a group, again, standards are pretty wordy. Everybody has received a copy of those, happy to send them out. But essentially, key themes that came out of this, first and foremost was the second standard, which is all about bylaws. How do we govern, how do we organize this system? And the theme, the reason that that this set of standards really came up was all around opportunities to clarify the purpose of the JRAC, in particular, when it comes to the executive members. Who are the executive members? What roles ought to fill those roles? What are the functions and expectations of that? And how will that help be a tool for clarifying the role and purpose of the JRAC moving forward? So that's where we spent a lot of time talking about bylaws, membership standards. Key themes that came out of that is when you look at the membership standards from the national standards compared to our bylaws, who's identified in JRAC locally, we're strongly in line. Really, really a great strength of JRAC at this time. And also engagement, connection, getting folks to the table during hectic times, busy schedules is a challenge and opportunity to focus on that re-engagement of all those key roles as set out in national standards was something pretty uniformly identified. The next standard that popped out is number 5, which is all around that executive committee standard. Kind of paralleled the discussion around bylaws and really setting up the expectations for the group. Specifically here though, when we talked about what is the role of the executive committee as set out in the best practice standards, a theme around agenda setting and really thinking about what are we focusing on each time this group comes together was something that popped out as an opportunity for evaluation of what we're doing based on the standards here. The next standard was all about standing committees and work groups. We spent a lot of time talking about what are the work groups of the JRAC at this time, and pulled out some strengths from the national standards when it comes to how are we keeping in touch both from work groups to the JRAC and vice versa, JRAC back down to the work groups. What are the work group structures? Are they codified in charters? And opportunities to really iron out the scope and purpose of the work groups, both individually and as they relate to that JRAC purpose overall. So a lot of conversation around how can we just make folks more aware of what the work groups are doing, what they are, and how the work groups know what the JRAC is working on. And then we looked at strategic planning. We're going to talk shortly, but one of the big activities we did was looking at the JRAC's current strategic plan. And y'all are an ambitious group. There are some big goals in there, a lot of stuff in there. So we talked a lot about an opportunity to look at this standard, focus on SMART goals whenever we get to the next strategic planning effort, so that we can really, frankly, the words up there, more easily determine our progress, what are we working on today, and how far are we getting towards our goals. And I think, standard 11. Yeah, we talked a lot about engagement and outreach. It was this theme of communication that also came up both internally How do folks in JRAC know what we're doing, what we're focusing on? What is that purpose that we talked about earlier? But also with the work groups, that bi-directional communication we also mentioned. And then there was this other theme of the community at large. How are we keeping them aware of what's going on in JRAC, what JRAC is focusing on, and how will we be leveraging the voice of the community to inform JRAC's priorities and what ought to be focused on moving forward? What are the tools and structures to keep that engagement and outreach consistent and strong? That's what came out of that discussion. And then administration. Another long standard talked about what are the staffing responsibilities, not we're talking executive leadership, but literally staffing on the admin side. I believe it came up in this point in the discussion that there are some of these councils that have full-time staff, that their job is to help coordinate this council. What does that look like? What are the responsibilities? What are the tasks that JRAC would benefit from when it comes to administration? And what do we want our staffing structure to be moving forward? These standards give some opportunity for evaluation around that, was the discussion that came out of this standard. And so again, before we move on to the next activity, I'll just reemphasize, those are just the standards that really popped out as helpful in addressing the challenges that were identified earlier in the discussion. Is a long list of standards overall. So from looking at what are our challenges, where do we see opportunities from best practices for these types of councils, we then transition to what have we achieved lately and what are our priorities moving forward? And en route to that discussion of kind of looking at, all right, at our strategic plan, where are we, what do we want to do next? Coming out of that standards discussion, there was this almost organic need to pause for a moment and think about what have we all heard really, really clearly right now so far, and identified some action items specifically around re-engaging key partners as one of the immediate actions before we even move forward thinking about our strategic priorities. That was an internal priority identified, and folks took on self-selected into outreaching with those individual members. So that is something that has been underway since the retreat, which transitioned us into what have we done and where do we want to go next? So we went through the strategic plan, looked at what have we accomplished, and talked about the group's priorities moving forward. And then strategy and innovation took those notes and layered them over the strategic plan as a whole. So look at, as laid out in your current strategic plan, what have you done? What do you want to move forward with? And I'm afraid this might be an older version of the slideshow that might not have all of the priorities. But I'll say this has been sent out to the group. You have a pretty, I mean, it's like we said, it's a big plan. There's a lot of items on there. You probably don't need me to read to you word for word off the slideshow. But Josh, would you mind flipping ahead just to make sure I'm right? Okay, yeah, will you take us back for a second, please? Thank you. Key themes around this were that a lot has been accomplished. It's pretty powerful to look at this list as a whole and see what has been accomplished, and also a real need or interest in focusing on that communication and outreach and continuing moving forward the strategies that were set out focused on equity, and advancing our equity-based efforts was another priority that came out of this conversation. So that was really the retreat in full, looking at what is the purpose of the JRAC, where do we see opportunities to look at internal organization based on best practice standards, what have we achieved, and what do we want to focus on moving forward. So from the information we gathered based on discussion that day, Dr. Lee Creighton and myself, who facilitated, as well as Heather, took the information, kind of debriefed, and generated a list of recommendations from what we heard in the group. Recommendations that we think we can now turn over to this group for y'all to discuss and identify where to go from here moving forward. So in short, those recommendations are around taking that larger list of priorities that I just mentioned and identifying 3 or 4 priorities for action this year. What does JRAC want to take from what we have in the strategic plan for the next year as what we're going to focus on right now? And then evaluate current bylaws based on the national standards that were discussed. How are we aligned with those? Are there any opportunities for updates, in particular, specifically when it comes to confirming JRAC's authority and reporting relationship? So it's in the name, right? This is an advisory body. There's kind of an implied to clarifying that. Create team charters for the work groups if they're not already in existence, make sure that they are, and that really outlines what is the expectations of JRAC from the work groups and vice versa. Looking at communication within JRAC. So how are we making sure that folks are really aware of their role? What are you signing up for? What is expected of you when you come to this body? As well as in identifying priorities and that communication of what we need to be sharing with the community as well. Clear agenda setting also coming up as a priority out of the communications bucket. Which really brings us to our next kind of bucket of recommendations, which is all around meeting structure and what might future meetings of the JRAC look like. Again, we heard a lot about this opportunity for agenda setting and for folks to know what's being discussed. They can predict what, okay, you know, maybe I have a conflict, but this is the topic I really want to make sure I'm there for. They can understand where recommendations might go by participating in the meetings. So there were some recommendations that the group really generated that we're just synthesizing here. Hold future meetings in the courthouse when possible, makes it more accessible for court partners. You know, it's right down the hall, come down, have a sandwich. Might be helpful for engagement. Make sure that we are being mindful of tangible outputs from every meeting. So with that agenda, what's the output that will come from that discussion? Consider restarting the executive committee focused on agenda setting. And with that agenda setting is not only necessarily what are the topics each meeting, but over the course of a calendar year. We'll show an example of that just on the next slide. But essentially there's structured agendas, and what we talk about each meeting could be planned based around maybe budget cycles, state legislative cycles. What do we need to be talking about right now to inform this process 3 months from now, in short? And then standing agenda items within the context of that calendar year schedule that would include updates from work groups. There's a lot of interest in figuring out how is this group hearing about what's going on with HIAC, the body that is working on implementing recommendations from last year's study from the National Alliance to End Homelessness around increasing shelter capacity, ending homelessness in our community. So probably not the exhaustive list of standing agenda items, but a couple examples of things that the group seemed to have some real shared consensus around. So one more slide, as I said, that is an example of what might a not just meeting standing agenda item, but over the course of a calendar year standing agenda structure look like if y'all are interested in reflecting something like the budget cycle or legislative, state legislative calendar. So that is, in short, summary of everything that y'all produced during last month's retreat. So at this point, we'll really turn it over to you for a discussion about where you go from here.
I wasn't able to attend for personal reasons, but Sam had texted me about the holding it in the courthouse. And we need to know what technology is necessary to have these meetings, because I don't think the courthouse has any space that's available for hybrid meetings, like for WebEx and in person. We don't have those technological capacities across the street.
Which is unbelievable.
I mean, yes, like we could only like commandeer a family court courtroom for that, and that is not gonna happen. Like, if you wanna talk to Judge Scott, you can, I will not. But, I mean, I will talk to him, but I'm not gonna ask him to choose his program, to be clear. So just, that's something, I think, in terms of dictating meeting space is like a necessary consideration with even the new part of our courthouse, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful. That's good information to have. Oftentimes we do have presentations and we don't have hybrid here, but we have allowed that on the first floor.
Right.
I know another option, if a courtroom is not an option, due to technology, I know the sheriff's office has a training room where
Okay.
all those capabilities are there. over
Yeah,
there. So
that
let's
might be a
keep
better
having
space, yeah.
conversations about those options, but I think that during the retreat, we really felt like we needed to be open to,
Sure.
yeah, to
Yeah.
that. So thank you.
You first.
I just talked to Judge Keppel before coming over here. She's on the racial equity group, and I know this was one of the bullet points, but one of the things we talked about at the retreat was, I guess, guidance from the JRAC to the committees about what they need to be working on. So she wanted me to mention that again so that they have some direction about the things that we want them to be focusing on.
I think mine kind of piggybacks on that. When we talk about what we should be doing in different meetings throughout the year, I think you raised a great point about following the legislative calendar. If there's some specific budget ask that we are asking for through the county, there are our lobbyists, like maybe we can front load the action items that we need from the state, because they've proven to be less than expeditious in their passing of a budget sometimes. So the earlier we get it on their calendar, I think the better off we'll be. And same for county, it benefits us to get in front of commission. It takes 2 meetings at a time to change any budget request. So the earlier the better. From that side, if something's going to require funding, and I think today's presentation was a good example of exactly that kind of thing that we want to get in front of commissioners before all the dollars go.
To your point, I think one of our first priorities is to, review what we have and identify 3 or 4 specific priorities that we want to work on this year. During the retreat, we had lots of conversations about communication and engagement. So I'm going to predict that that may be one of those priorities. What does that look like for JRAC to communicate internally and externally? One of the recommendations from the standards is that we have like an annual report, and we haven't done that. So that might be it, but other things may be that, what specific we need from the community engagement work group, what we need from the racial equity work group, as well as the behavioral health justice collaborative. I think that's one of our first next steps, is to really come together and figure out what are our top 3, 4 priorities. To that end, we can look at maybe sending out a form to you all to give your top 4 or top 3 priorities. And then when we come back to our next meeting, we can have some consensus around how we move forward. Then we'll be able to give some feedback to those work groups.
I would also recommend aligning it to our strategic plan, or like naming things that we know we're just not gonna work on, like we were ambitious, we can prioritize those in alignment with what the work groups can work on. So it's all like this symbiotic relationship, and we're not doing it compartmentalized. But in the meantime, I know the work groups are eager, if they can establish their charter, like just who's on the work group, how do you get on the work group, just a basic working document to help guide their work too, then we can come with like top priorities and goals.
Can I ask a question about that process? Is it possible, I know the community engagement work group has already set course for their work for this year and potentially 2024. Is it possible for them to provide information on their priorities for you all to review what they have deemed as important to them, for you all to consider, and help guide them to expand their work or choose not to support them moving in those directions?
For me, that seems like coming with the project charter. Like I even know the Behavioral Health Justice Collaborative have a charter. If they formalize the charter and the priority that gives something for the JRAC to react to, and even for the racial equity, if they come up with a basic charter, they still want direction, we can give some input.
Coming into this, like after the groups had already been formed, that was something I still don't really understand, how we have work groups that involve people that aren't part of JRAC.
I think that was part of the conversation during the retreat, is that there is some I think a number of folks don't have all of that knowledge of.
So will that be one of the next steps, maybe the slide before, like the bylaws and some of that, is that? Because I read the bylaws like almost every time to make sure, and I still don't think I understand structurally how it works.
So I can offer some insight on that one. For example, I'll use the BHJC as an example. We have certain folks that are valuable community stakeholders who are very helpful. And for example, VIA is one of our work groups, provide a lot of insight, probably don't need to get involved in the criminal justice conversation at a greater level. We have representation from BHJC, two folks who are here right now, actually. But I don't know that we necessarily need them for every JRAC meeting. It's just really intended to do a lot of the brainstorming and promotion of a plan, and whether or not we adopt it is certainly our choice, but it might turn this into a 50-person JRAC.
I think so. Also on the flip side, so yes, and the structure is that we have JRAC members that sit on the work groups, but those work groups are also open to other stakeholders and partners. And that was structured when we first did our first bylaws. So if there are questions or concerns, or we can look at our bylaws to see if we would like to change them. But what we found is that we only can have a certain number of folks on the JRAC. And the work is so complex and complicated, and it takes so many other partners to help really develop solutions for these complicated issues that we have or concerns that we have. It's valuable to have them in the work groups to push up solutions or recommendations to the JRAC as a whole. So currently structured, yes, people that are not on the JRAC can sit on the work groups.
There should be JRAC members in
Yes.
each work group. I also think we talked in the retreat, I don't know if it's in the recommendation, it sounded like a standing report where the committees put the report in our emails, and they're open to come to meetings, wear a name tag, so we know that these are our work group members.
Right, like it would list, that's what I was thinking of, was that we said we would list the work groups, who's in it, and those updates, yeah.
It just seems interesting as we're trying to establish like a couple priorities to focus on that behind the scenes, these work groups right now may have already established through 2024 a set of priorities that may or may not align with what the JRAC moves forward with.
I think that's what Terry was mentioning. Some work groups have, like Behavioral Health Justice Collaborative. We started to do work in that space, community engagement team. I think racial equity has kind of held off on establishing any plans or structures until they hear from us. And Tiffany's suggestion is they can, go ahead and set their charters and then share whatever ideas that they have as a part of those charters with JRAC, and we would ultimately review and say, yep, this is the direction we need to go in, or consider this, or give them more direction on how they need to move forward for the next year or two.
And I think if, Josh, would you mind going back to the previous slide of some of those recommendations? I do think that's where some of that agenda setting or consistency planning may help close some of those gaps if those regular updates are happening. And I'll just make a note to your point about what does it mean if there's people who don't sit here, what does it mean to be a subcommittee? An example to share is the BHJC charter includes language around leadership and identifies that the BHJC must be chaired by a member of JRAC to kind of clarify that, just put it in black and white, that relationship a little bit. May or may not be useful for other groups, but an example.
Which I got voluntold to chair the behavioral justice.
I remember you saying, please let That's how I remember that.
I do think it's worthwhile when we put the structure together, get clarity, it'll answer some of the ambiguousness of how we're operating. I think because we haven't had direction or like there haven't been a chain of communication, it does feel like they're all doing their own thing. We're over here setting our own priorities. I will say a lot of the material is centered around like SJC and the strategic plan, so it's not like well off. Like it's things that we've talked about in every meeting probably, but we're just not making the connections.
Can I add one connection? So the Safety and Justice Challenge Grant has its own recommendations and requirements, but they're looking to the JRAC to make sure that they're doing the right things as it relates to implementation strategies. But part of the grant, as it is written, it includes community engagement and racial equity specifically because they're doing the work. But JRAC is also looking to build a guide to say, are they those subcommittees or those work groups actually doing their job? And so that's how JRAC and those subcommittees work together in tandem to ensure the successful implementation of that larger plan.
Yeah, And I think one of the things we were very intentional about, we probably weren't clear about our intentionality, is when we did our bylaws, we made sure that we would make those racial equity and community engagement standing meetings of JRAC. So those should exist outside of any grant needs, right? They kind of grew up out of SJC MacArthur grant, but those two items were important enough that we put it in our bylaws to say, we never get another grant funding, we don't get any additional funding from MacArthur. These are things that JRAC thinks that are important to move forward. And then not long after that, we continue to see the intersection of behavioral health and justice. And so that's why that third work group was added to our bylaws. Sam.
Everybody should be made aware that on October 1st, the Pretrial Integrity Act came into effect. And that affects folks who are on pretrial release, who are rearrested on a new charge and taken before a magistrate. The magistrate is now prohibited in setting a bond. So that's going to increase the jail stays for folks who have been essentially arrested on a second offense following their release. And we need to be aware that that's going to increase our jail numbers, certainly in the near term, and put a lot more burden on the district courts to review those bonds. And it's going to change the numbers drastically. And there may be strategies to deal with that would probably involve law enforcement and making decisions before an arrest is made and those sorts of things. And, if we're going to address that and triage it, those are things that need to be discussed. So that's one. And then two, Jean Marie is going to be the point person on this, is the e-courts is coming, and the county needs to understand it and almost needs to be aware that it's going to be like a coming hurricane. It's going to dramatically change the court system, and it's not going to be easy. We hope on the back end of it, it's going to make a vastly improved court system, and that's the optimistic view, but there's a lot of pessimism. And it's going to require, I think, a great deal of effort from the county in any way the county can provide assistance to the state in making this happen. I think Jean Marie, Meredith would agree. Anyone who is already dealing with some of the difficulties and just working with other parts of the state, just be aware it's coming. It's coming sometime next year. We don't know exactly when it is. It goes like next week in Charlotte?
Okay, I'm gonna use that as a beautiful segue. Thank you, Sam. E-warrants has already been screwed up. Sorry. Trying to undo my PD mouth. When it's gonna go live on Monday, honestly, starting today at 5:30.
In Mecklenburg.
In Mecklenburg, it's going live, but systems are going dark, like all legacy systems. So ACES.
With hours?
Mm-hmm. It's okay. It is okay.
It's not okay for us. All right, go ahead.
It's so much harder on the PDs than the clerks, Sam. I've told my people, we're gonna have to handwrite everything and we're gonna input it. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna suck for a couple days next week. I will not be here, so don't blame me.
I'm sorry, how long are they going dark?
2 days.
Oh, so I thought you meant.
No, it's not just gonna disappear. Yes, that would be
It does
nightmare.
disappear in the counties where it goes live, our legacy systems disappear.
It's already
Just
gone.
to be clear.
But anyways, it is gonna be difficult. Also, I know historically there's been a lot of state data that we've worked with the county on the county creating databases. Janet Watson does all our SPCs, and that is information that we are going to need back into our state system. So I know this isn't, but I think it is important to JRAC. My office can be working a lot with the county on how do we, as efficiently and easily as possible for everyone, get that information into a form that can be easily uploaded to Odyssey when we get there. We'll figure it out. I'm gonna be it's all gonna be okay cheerleader, but it's not gonna be easy, but it's gonna be okay. But anyways, just kind of a heads up that things that we did that were useful we're gonna have to undo some of them.
Yes, so if we can schedule a call like as soon as possible to talk through that, I've been through at least 2 court implementations.
Sure.
And it's not pleasant at all, so I enjoy your optimism. So if there's support needed from the county, we probably need to know that sooner rather than later. If you have a go live date or a time period, we can back up from that and
Sure.
understand the moving parts. And Lee is out this week, but he'll be excited
Yeah.
to get back.
We don't have a go live date yet, but me, Ryan Stone, Shannon Rhodes, and Natalie Morgan are all going to Johnston County on October 23rd. And they have terminals set up, and like they'll be sworn in as assistants in Johnston County for the day, get their own computer and be working it. So
Johnson was in phase 1 with Wade
Yeah,
and Barnett.
Okay.
so that's gonna be my attempt. We're gonna see how it goes. Then we're gonna see when we're gonna go live, and I'll be working on sending as many clerks as possible to places that have it, which I think will so it's gonna be an ongoing process of seeing what we need, because I don't know, they like to tell us stuff, but I feel like it's not as useful. It'd be better to not know something.
Okay.
But
Well, it's very important. That's a very important system for you all, so.
yes, they were pulling in the dark for a little bit.
That was fine. I just thought, I had heard it was going dark and I thought maybe permanently.
No, just things are gonna have to be written down and inputted later.
And Todd and I have talked about going to Charlotte to see it as well.
Yeah.
They started.
I'm kind of hoping Hickory gets it before we do, because then it's kind of close, similar size, and we can all just.
All right, well, that's gonna be major. So thanks for bringing it into the space.
One of the benefits of not being in those first phases is hearing like what the problems have been and what the hiccups are. Is there like are we gonna kind of gather that information on the back? There's gotta be a lot of information now, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I have I'll take more notes, but I'm like, the clerk in Johnston County is like, really good at her job, but was also probably the best of the pilot counties of getting other groups on board. I think they had the least active resistance, like Wake had the most active resistance. So I will talk to her about it, but there's like a lot of ongoing problem solving too. One issue that comes up a lot is if someone logs into the portal access for Odyssey, a judgment will not include the interest on their side. So they have to call us and we have to like press what she calls the green skittle. I don't know what that means because I don't have access to it, and it calculates. So there's just weird things that do create public access hiccups.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what those are as they come out as you gain that like for other parts of for other community, like folks who, thinking of, the groups from the coordinated response team that I represent that like might want to know what kind of hiccups the court system itself is likely to experience coming up, where the gaps are. Then cool about that.
The state has a criminal defense listserv, and there's a person, an observer in Wake County who posts just practitioner updates and how it's like to practice in Wake County as a criminal defense attorney, and what problems they're running into and how they're trying to solve them. And that's going on within our listserv around the state each day. The public defender offices we're a little bit better equipped. There's also a whole layer of private assigned counsel, but in terms of infrastructure, Buncombe County is pretty well set up because all of the attorney offices are going to have fairly robust internet.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's a problem in some of the rural counties because some of the practicing attorneys do not have the type of internet that's needed in order to interact with the court system, because everything is going to be done via computer. And so those are a lot of the concerns. And anyway, we don't need to get into the weeds too much other than, yes, there's an ongoing information sharing with the counties that are affected.
One thing to get into the weeds on that I think we should think about, in terms of Wi-Fi at the courthouse, I can anticipate the attorney is not wanting to be using public, like the Buncombe County guest or the judicial guest Wi-Fi when they're there to be doing their work on. So just to think about, and again, this is one of those, is the state gonna help us on this one? Probably not, but like having a secured network that attorneys or paralegal, or like, you know, you have to go through some sign-up process. Basically, like, if you can get a badge, you can somehow get access to this secured Wi-Fi network so that when they're on their work computers, they feel comfortable. Because I just anticipate them only being able to access a public Wi-Fi network being a problem.
Hotspot, maybe. They can bring a hotspot. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I was like, oh, what I was just something. Yeah, that could be an issue.
Is there anything that prevents you from going ahead and getting access to the, like, registering and just like playing around with it?
On the portal side, no, you can make your own account and
So
see
you
how
can go ahead.
I've done that, Suzanne, but I didn't see anything on my end. I didn't see,
Well, that's because you're just a member of the public.
right.
No,
Right,
but to
I-
go through
you're-
the,
wait, so
or
wait,
fill out the.
I don't have any elevated access.
Well,
I'm not getting
so-
appointed clients.
Yeah, you can't
know,
get
so-
elevated access until you can apply for elevated access, do that once in each county, goes through VOC. You are only granted elevated access when you are assigned as the attorney of, like the counsel of record in that case. So unless you're gonna be counsel of record in one of the 4 pilot counties or Met.
You see, so
Then you
you
won't.
don't see a whole lot when you log on,
Yeah.
because you just are a member of the public.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of standing in front of the virtual courthouse, essentially. You know,
Well, lots to work through. If Jean,
I'm gonna be
maybe,
better at making a list and not just.
yes, and then connect with us and we'll get the right people to work with you all. So anything else for Kathleen? You're just standing there. So
Sorry, I've been sitting all day.
That's good. Anything else for Kathleen?
So I think our next step is to hold the e-board meeting based on bylaws. I think I'm on it, which is great. And then,
What is e-board?
the executive committee,
We're
I
just talking about e-courts.
yeah, I was like e-board, e-courts. The steering committee, I think call it the steering committee. For the steering committee to help us shore up your recommendations.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Heather. Next, we have update on the Safety and Justice Challenge. And we have Lisa, I think I'm gonna pronounce your name wrong.
It's Souza.
Souza.
Yeah.
All right, our SJC grant manager.
I gotta see this thing. I know we're running a little late, so we'll try to be quick. So I'm the grant manager for the Safety and Justice Challenge. I started in June, so I haven't been here a ton of time. But I am going to go through a little bit about the grant. I'm just gonna briefly talk about the background, the jail population data, and then the 3 strategies in this current grant. We can go to the next slide. So the Safety and Justice Challenge Grant is a national initiative to safely reduce jail populations and eliminate racial inequities in local criminal justice systems. So this is a national effort by the MacArthur Foundation. And there's 57 cities, counties, and states that are involved. So we have had 4 grants here in Buncombe County, beginning in 2016. And our latest is at the bottom, 1.1 million is what we are in actively the grant now. And it is a combined investment of $4.6 million by the MacArthur Foundation for Buncombe County. And this grant opportunity, this is a 2-year grant that we just got. And it will be going away, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is the 6th year that we have been doing these strategies. This is the current budget for the grant that we're in now, and it goes through March 31st, 2025. And you can look at the details in the packet. We can go to the next slide. But there are some funded positions in this grant, an equity inclusion specialist, which is Terry here, and a grant manager.
And contracted positions, 1 assistant public defender, 1 assistant district attorney, 1 attorney for the driver's license restoration program, and a legal assistant for that program as well, and 1 court navigator. So this is the jail population report that gets sent out bi-weekly. And the information in this report also gets like reformatted and emailed out to a group, which probably most of you are on. And if you're not on, please let me know. I'm happy to add anybody who wants to just be informed with what the population is looking like. This is a snapshot of the jail population, and it includes how many people are in only for failure to appear, the percentage of the jail population who is Black, and the number of bookings over the weekends. This is usually run on early Monday morning. And a number of people who are on electronic monitoring supervision, and it just kind of tracks the trends. And it's every 2 weeks, and obviously these numbers fluctuate as it's a changing number. You can go to the next slide. So the major goals of the Safety and Justice Challenge is to reduce the local jail population and decrease racial disparities in the system. So you can kind of see how we're doing. Our target is 327 for the monthly average daily population. For the months between July and September, we were at 405. But I want to put that a little bit in perspective because in the first year of the Safety and Justice Challenge grant, we were at 441. So I think that because of all these efforts, we have been able to kind of keep that number as a steady one, although we haven't been able to decrease it except during COVID, which we had a record low number of people in the jail, and we hit 262. And we had actually increased to our target of 327, and we held that for 10 months. But ever since then, it's been slowly increasing. And, it is still in that biweekly jail population report, you can kind of see it slowly increasing. But we can imagine if these efforts were not going on in the past 6 years, what our jail population may be looking like today. We might be in really big trouble with the jail. The racial disparities number is still way, way out of whack. Our goal is to have 6% of the local jail population identified as Black or African American, and we are at over 30% pretty much regularly. So there's still a lot to do with this grant. You can go ahead. So for this particular grant that we're in now, the 3 strategies are to increase efficiencies in case processing, to advance racial equity, and to increase community engagement. And these are where the work groups fall under. Some of the JRAC work groups fall under these strategies. Okay, so the first strategy, advancing racial equity, includes the racial equity work group, which has been on a break, but they do meet monthly. And these are some of the activities that have been included under the racial equity strategy, which includes the work group. And I'm just going to touch briefly on these because I believe Terry presented a racial equity update not too long ago, so I don't want to go too in depth, but we will talk briefly about each of these strategies or activities. So culturally aligned counseling. So this is something that happened under this grant. It was a partnership with From the Ashes, an African American counseling service. And they provided substance use disorder counseling to high-risk clients. And the service was picked up and now it's offered across all justice service programming. Go to the next one. Collaborative civility training, and this was a training that was developed by the National Institute for Racial Equity. And it's to improve the relationships between the community and law enforcement. So in 2022, there were 3 sessions held, an average of 20 participants each, and the participants learned about the history of policing. And it was focused on having people from the community understanding the pressures and trauma experienced by law enforcement, and law enforcement understanding community members' responses and encounters with police. And I believe the city of Asheville picked up this training. Trauma-informed training, this was another initiative that happened, which was provided by Circuit Court Judge Susan B. Carbon. It's a nationally recognized expert on domestic violence. The purpose of the training was to further Buncombe County's efforts to create a trauma-informed culture that enhances physical and emotional safety in the courthouse. And that was in February of 2023, and some of you might have been involved in that training. Also under this grant is a driver's license restoration program. And one of our contracted positions is in partnership with Physical Legal, and there's also a legal assistant that helps out. And the reporting period that we have here is March 1st through June 30th, 2023. 51 individuals were assisted during the reporting period. And, helping people to get back their license improves people's ability to be employed, to have childcare stability, access to healthcare, and can really help avoid future involvement in the criminal justice system. Go to the next one. And this is the demographics of who was served during that time period. So 60.4% identified as white, 32.1% identified as Black or African American. There are very few percentages of other folks besides that. And this program seems to be really promising. We will be continuing that through the rest of this grant period. And this is also, I think, a really important thing that happened through this grant is that, we established the possibility of capturing ethnicity data at the detention center. Before this project, we were only capturing if people were either Black or white. And so now we have all of these options to capture other ethnicities at the detention center, which will help us develop strategies to ensure that we are culturally aligning our programs and services to the people who are actually in the jail. Okay, so strategy number 2, increasing efficiencies in case processing. So these are the activities under that, and we'll go through each one really quick. So there is a case processing work group that meets monthly, and it addresses issues like any issue that comes up basically about how we can increase the efficiency of case processing and moving things quicker through the system. And that can, include all kinds of different issues. Like last meeting, we were talking about how to make some additional signage just to make sure that people had the correct court date when they leave the detention center. So we were working on creating a poster, updating the court reminder calls so that people knew how to call to make sure that they knew what the next date was and for them to show up at court. And we also have a jail review team that meets weekly, and that is to expedite case resolution for individuals in custody, and that includes people from the district attorney's office, public defender's office, people out from the jail and from pretrial. And I think both of these work groups are functioning really well right now. I think there's a lot of things that happen early. Hopefully, I think it also creates a place that people can really come together and talk to each other and be face to face and bring up any issues that are occurring. The Court Navigator pilot program is located in the courthouse lobby. This photo is of Betsy Chavez, who was our first Court Navigator, and this position is contracted through Goodwill. And it's really to help people find their way through the courthouse, as well as signing people up for the court reminder system. But we have a new Court Navigator starting just this week, Nicholas Bolette. And he will also be providing employment and job search assistant to clients of the Justice Resource Center. So that's really exciting. And the initial goal for this project was to serve 200 people within 6 months. During the first 4 months, the Court Navigator served 1,774 individuals. And I can say, as a newcomer in the courthouse, this is really needed because it's very confusing to get around in the courthouse. And even when I'm coming in, I always see people wondering where those elevators are, trying to figure out where to go. So I think this is a wonderful program. The court reminder system is really an effort to bring down those failure to appears. And it was a project developed by Code with Asheville so that people can sign up and receive text messages that remind them of their court dates. They can sign up with the Court Navigator, but the really important place that they can sign up is when they're moved into the jail. And the numbers really just ballooned when we had that available at the jail. So we have a lot of people enrolled, and people can also scan the QR codes on the posters or just go directly to the website to sign up as well. So we have had a promotional campaign to promote the court reminder system, as well as what happens, the consequences of a failure to appear. And so we had several digital billboards around Asheville for the entire month of September. We're also running social media ads and hopefully some radio and TV coming up. So just to really get the word out, to get people enrolled in the court reminder system, and just also to educate people about what can happen if they don't show up for their court date. So our final strategy, increasing community engagement. There's several activities that are included in the strategy. We can go to the next slide. The community engagement work group. This work group is really active. It's community led. It meets monthly. They table at community events, so they're very much out in the community, talking to people, and there with resources. And they're going to be also they have done several listening sessions, but they're going to be starting to do listening sessions again. And hopefully, there was talk about working with the Behavioral Health Justice Committee on these upcoming listening sessions, which is really exciting. And they also have a subcommittee, which is a communication subcommittee, which will be working on communicating about the justice system to people in the community, explaining how the system works, and also publicizing resources available for folks at the Justice Resource Center. Okay, finally, this is our last slide. We have a site visit from the funders, which a lot of you attended, and thank you so much if you were a part of it. We had people from the MacArthur Foundation and our technical assistance providers, JMA Justice and the Vera Institute. And I think it was a really wonderful site visit, and it went very well. They expressed that they were impressed by the growth of our programs, our ability to collect data and analysis, and they were very impressed by the equity work going on in this county. However, we still have so much work to do with lowering the jail population numbers and decreasing racial inequities. So, they definitely made sure we knew we still have some work to do on those fronts. And we will be able to apply once this grant is done in 2025. Next year, we'll be able to apply for capstone funding, which will be a path to transition to other funding sources. And it will basically be for half of our award this time. And it will be able to support some of the staff and some of the strategies that we think are the most effective moving forward.
That's it. Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? All right. Seeing none, we have maybe a minute or so left. Any quick announcements? I want to make sure we get to, if there's someone on here or if there's anybody here, but public comment, if there's anyone on virtually that would like to do public comment. Any updates or from the members?
Oh, I don't want to do DV awareness. I don't have the date.
You don't know all the dates?
We have the 19th, but we're gonna send that, we'll send the emails out.
Domestic.
You were reminding me of it, not telling my husband.
Oh.
Anyway, yes, it's DV awareness month. We need to get some more information. There are a lot of events, and I don't know them all off the top of my head. I do know that Physical Legal Services has its Justice Forum on October 17th, and bringing back Matthew Deslin to talk about poverty and homelessness intervention, which could be really relevant to a lot of this group.
Wear purple then?
That's what we'll send out.
Okay, all right.
We do
So
an
get your
annual
purple.
photo wearing purple, but we did front of city, what's that? I never remember the pavilion. But this time it's gonna be at 35 Woodward. So we'll send it out. It's usually around lunchtime. So we're purple and take a picture. I do want to say that this is the first time I've heard all of the municipalities are doing their own proclamation for domestic violence awareness. So I live in another community. Yep, yours is on Tuesday. County Theirs last Tuesday. There's a few more, all of them on Tree Flat Mountain, Woodfin, Noble Forest, Weeville. We'll do proclamations.
There's a vigil that makes helping as well for,
All right, well, if y'all could send that out and get it to Josh so he can send it out so everybody is aware. Any other updates? Tomorrow there is a reparations summit happening at UNC Asheville. If we haven't sent that out, we'll send that out to you all as well. You may or may not know that there is a impact focus area for criminal justice. And so the community members on that team have been working hard to develop recommendations from their perspective around criminal justice. And so we'll need to make sure once those ideas have been vetted, that you all also have access to. But if you want to hear more about it, you can come out tomorrow and there'll be a breakout session. You want to add anything to that?
The only thing that I would add is registration is closed.
I was thinking
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness, yes.
No,
That part.
registration.
Fire marshal gonna come?
Yes.
Thank you, Deborah. It is, yeah. So if you have not registered, huh?
Is there a virtual option?
There's not a virtual option, but.
It will be recorded.
Yeah, okay. So it will be recorded so that we can plan to share. Once their ideas are more firmed out, we were gonna plan for that group to come and present to JRAC so that you all can hear more about what may be coming forward from that body, so.
The IFA group will be reviewing their data next Wednesday. So they'll be looking at all that. So it'll be a heavy lift. It'll take them a while.
Yeah.
So because that's a lot of data that's gonna, we'll have to come through to look at past times and see how to get those recommendations together.
We have, so Lamb and Tiffany and Terry are all working with that IFA, so they'll be able to lead us in that conversation.
Didn't Sam come present to the IFA?
Yeah, I'm talking with subject matter experts.
You mean with Todd and
Yeah.
Sheriff?
All right.
It's,
Okay, I
And
will.
Todd, and by the way, Todd and I are debating, speaking next Wednesday at the bar lunch
Okay.
about issues that we talk about in this room, particularly.
Is it closed
should.
to the bar members?
The bar lunch is for the Buckingham County Bar. So you were barred, unless you were barred, you're barred.
So
I
I
will be
will
a fly.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
October 9th, we're purple.